Morty, I'm sorry. That stuff is alive and it belongs with us. We yanked them from their homes and locked them in a can. See? They're living in pain.
That's what they do, Rick. They live in pain. They are pain, you know? They're all the bad parts of us, which, by the way, includes our dishonesty. So how do you know this isn't all some sort of crazy trick?
Oh, so now because I'm made entirely of toxins, I'm also a liar? You little sociopath.
Hey everybody, new Rick and Morty, let's break it down. Grab your Terry folds. So there is a new round of that merch giveaway too. All you have to do to enter, just be a subscriber, leave a comment on this video. So just to start in reverse a little bit, you may have spotted the Game of Thrones dig that Adult Swim took at the end of the episode, but I think they only showed it on TV. So it was like a really brief thing that only a portion of the audience saw. Justin Roiland, the other creators of Rick and Morty, were going crazy. We didn't do this. We had nothing to do with throwing shade at Game of Thrones. So apparently somebody at Adult Swim thought it would be funny to make a joke about the writing on Game of Thrones after the episode because the Game of Thrones finale was this past Sunday before the Rick and Morty episode. So RIP to whoever at Adult Swim was able to get that on the air. But the weird thing about that is it's actually pretty hard to get things on broadcast. So it'll be fun to see what the truth of that is. But you probably saw the cold open back at Comic-Con. That was sort of the Comic-Con teaser they released. It's just like the entire thing. It is a bit of a parody of Star Wars 20-minute adventure. You learn Jessica and her friends are single again. This girl even looks exactly like big stripper titties that Summer was pissed about in last week's episode, who is just going on and on about how she wants to get peed on, how she wants all this gross stuff to happen to her. So American Psycho Morty missed out hardcore, but I guess the girlfriend that he ended up finding at the end of the episode was equally as twisted because she was totally cool with him being a little kid. But there's all kinds of visual references in this cold open, even though it technically doesn't have a lot to do with the actual story of the episode, which is equally as sexual. There were a lot of sex jokes. Is this a sex dungeon? What's going on here? Safe word is sea cucumber and a naked Rick for like a pretty solid 5 minutes of the episode almost. But in the quest to get this giant gem, 20-minute adventure, in and out Morty, they're being chased by these giant sperm ships that look like they're trying to fertilize this egg in the middle of this giant space vagina looking ship. So it becomes this big Return of the Jedi montage as they blow up the Death Star here, but it's this big metaphor about having sex as they escape. The animation's great on this. And the funny thing about Morty here is when he screams, it almost looks like they're animating it to look a little bit like the lemon grab scream from Adventure Time. Most of you probably know that Justin Roiland, voice of Rick and Morty, one of the creators of the show, also did the voice for Lemon Grab. So every once in a while, he'll talk about Lemon Grab stuff, like where's all the Lemon Grab merch? Asking for a friend.
It's gross! I was not in control of that situation at all.
But when they go to the day spa to chill out, that creature that eats them is actually a spa-vor. If you're not familiar, it's the shortened form of vorophilia. It's like the compulsion to consume another person or another creature. Be careful if you're going to search for vor stuff on the internet because you will find some really twisted stuff. But Rick just says they're taking advantage of something that it would be doing naturally. It'd be like taking someone with autism to Vegas who is really good with numbers to count cards. So technically he's taking advantage of it in a bad way. Morally, he's still classic Rick. He hasn't purged any of the bad parts of himself. So they purge themselves, they move on, and we learn about the world of the tank. So the whole concept of this episode, the evil shadow self, like the toxic self, was actually taken from Wizard of Earthsea. So if you're a big fan of those novels, that's what the writers were going for. It's where someone has to confront their shadow self. But the big difference is that the Earthsea novels are written about magic. So it's about this kid who's training to be a mage, but in trying to impress a girl and getting in all kinds of fights at school, he raises this shadow demon that he then has to face much later. So technically, I would think the protagonist in that is Rick, because Rick's the one that has the real confrontation with his shadow self. American Psycho Morty really just tries to avoid having to merge with his. Next big Gravity Falls Easter egg is actually a really good one, and it actually makes sense based on the episode that they pulled it from. So in the world of the tank, you see like basically everybody's toxic selves get dumped. So you have all this crap taken from all these different people, but you actually spot 8-Ball from the Weird Mageddon storyline on Gravity Falls. So the really cool thing about that, if you haven't seen those episodes in a while, it's actually a story arc from Gravity Falls where basically Bill tries to take over the normal reality of Gravity Falls. So it's a bit like Rick from the tank, Toxic Rick, trying to take over the real world. Bill tries to do the exact same thing, and 8-Ball here is just part of his evil group, but they end up defeating him later and then banish them all to another dimension. So it's implied that 8-Ball got banished to the world of the tank. Like in the world of Gravity Falls, there's an alternate dimension called the Mindscape, so you can think of that as sort of the path to the tank. So for all you conspiracy theorists that are trying to prove that Gravity Falls is just one of the alternate realities of the Rick and Morty TV show, this is just more proof of that. But they kind of already proved that back in episode 1 with Mabel and Dipper Morty. So pretty cool Easter egg, another good reason to go back and watch that Gravity Falls story arc too. There weren't a whole lot of Easter eggs in the fight montages where you have Toxic Rick versus Regular Rick. You just learned there are a lot of gadgets hidden around the house, so mental note, remember that there's all these things just hidden around in plain sight. But the funny thing here is that you look in the background at the family photos and Beth has taped a picture of a horse over Jerry's head. But I will say the American Psycho Morty post-credit scene is probably one of my favorite. One, because the stuff that they're pulling from is also really funny. So if you haven't seen American Psycho, it's a great Christian Bale story. The book is way more graphic, but it's just basically about this person with zero conscience, as Rick says. But when he's actually doing that stock sale on the phone, like when you actually see him being a stockbroker, the speech they're pulling from is actually Wolf of Wall Street, the Leonardo DiCaprio movie, which is equally as funny. Like the character in that, it just is ridiculous, but he's not quite as murderous as American Psycho. Love me some American Psycho Morty, he gets some crazy tail. And I'm not sure why they did this, but they turned Rick's drones into Voltron. Maybe that was just like another funny joke to add at the end of the episode, like on top of all this ridiculous stuff that was happening. But if you spotted any more Easter eggs or references in the episode, just write them below in the comments. What's going to happen is there's no new episode next week, so the next episode isn't for 2 weeks, but I'll still be doing some Rick and Morty. Because Game of Thrones is done, my schedule is a little bit more free, so it'll be a little easier for me to post Rick and Morty videos earlier. Like this took me a little bit longer to get out because of the big Game of Thrones finale. Just to bring it back around to that Rick and Morty Game of Thrones dig, which is technically an Adult Swim dig, not to throw the Rick and Morty people under the bus. But all that naked Rick aside, the episode was fantastic. So let me know, favorite moment from the episode, like favorite joke that they did, and your favorite episode so far this season. I'm liking this episode a little bit more than last week's episode, which was also one of my favorite of the season so far. So new Rick and Morty posting later this week. I might have to do a Gravity Falls Easter egg montage at some point because almost every episode, not quite every episode, but almost, they have a Gravity Falls reference. So we'll say congratulations to the latest merch giveaway, Sigma Gaming. Please private message me on the back end of my channel so I can get your contact details. You can click here for more Rick and Morty, and you can click here for brand new Game of Thrones. Thank you so much for watching. Everybody stay awesome. I'll see you guys tonight.